Okay, so you all picked the poem up on the way in, right? Theories of Time and Space. Before we jump into the poem, just as a review, there's a few ideas that we talked about early in the school year that I want to kind of revisit. The first thing was, through the fall, I had a list of rhetorical devices up here on the board. And they haven't been on the board, but we're still using them in class. They're still important. It starts with a subject and we end with the theme at the end. Okay, so what's the subject? The subject of a poem, story, novel, literally what's being said, right? I mean, it's no secret. You read through it once, you should have an idea. It's talking about, getting ice cream, or it's talking about a puppy dog, or, okay. The next one on the list is probably one of the most important things that we need to always consider and look at, really. And that's point of view. And what is that? Carol, what's point of view?
For the poem?
For anything, just in general. What's it mean?
First person.
Okay, so that's an example of point of view. The perspective from where the story's coming from. Who's telling us the story? Why is that so important? So you get a good understanding of what's going on, because we don't all see things the same way. I've used the example, two boys fight in the hall, and we break up the fight and put them in different classrooms and let them calm down, and then we go to boy A and say what happened, and then we go to boy B and say what happened. Are we gonna get exactly the same story? No, because they saw it differently. And what? Yeah. One of the other examples that I've used is, say a little girl comes in here and says, there's a scary man out in the hall. We receive that message, okay. What if Sean, the 6'5" SWAT team police officer we have on the campus, if he comes in and says, there's a scary man out in the hall, does that message mean something different? Because of who's telling us the message, right? So we always want to know who's telling us the story, their background, their experience, where they're coming from. Setting in context, setting time and place of the story itself. The context has more to do with the author and the writing of it and when it's published and what's going on in the world at the time. Okay, and I'll give you an example of that as we look at this poem. Conflict. You don't always have conflict in poetry, but with short stories and novels, you definitely do, because if you don't have conflict, you don't have a story. You've got to have that problem. Tone and mood. You've got a speaker. He's telling us the story. What is his attitude about it? Is the overall atmosphere or mood of the poem or story or novel, is it happy or sad? And does it change? Because a lot of times it changes. Your attitudes change in the course of a day. You might not be a morning person and you're sleepy and kind of dragging in the morning, but then after lunch, you're wide awake, ready to go, and your outlook changes. So the attitude and outlook of our characters and the storyline itself, it changes. So tone and mood. Tone is about the speaker and how they feel about it. Mood is about me, the reader. And especially with poetry, not this poem, but especially with poetry, we're looking for a tone shift, where those changes happen. Figurative language, imagery, symbolism, we always want to look for that kind of stuff, especially in poetry. You can find symbolism in novels, and we certainly will in The Great Gatsby, but with poetry, usually there's a lot of symbolism and imagery and figurative language. It's just part of it. And then theme. If subject is what is literally surfacey being talked about, okay, obvious. Theme is, you got to go deeper. The theme is not explicitly stated. You have to figure that out. If you go down this list and you identify these things, as you paraphrase the poem, that will help get you to the theme. And we'll do that together with this poem, Theories of Time and Space. But theme is going to be that universal lesson, that big commentary on life, the moral of the story, if you will, the lesson what you can take and apply to your own life. to help you and, help inform you on how to be a good person, or how to live, or how to be successful, or whatever. Okay, so we've got that list. There were 4 questions that we started the year with that deal with characters. We talked about characterization, direct and indirect characterization. But with characters, there's 4 questions. You may not remember what they are. I've got notes up here. Characters. Who are they? What are their relationships to each other like? What are their motivations? So what do they want? And then the role they play. What do they do for the story? So just as a hint, and I need to make a poster, but you've got characters, relationships, motivations, and role. What do they do for the story? Okay. But the big one I think is the relationships to other characters and the motivations. Okay. So those are 2 big ideas that we started the year with: the rhetorical devices, what we do with characters. The third thing that we talked about in the fall with poetry particularly is how do we approach a poem for the first time? You're not familiar with it, but I'm asking you, what does it mean? So you've got to kind of analyze it a little bit. So what's the strategy? What do we do? And my strategy that I like for poetry is consider the title and the author, survey the poem, read the poem, and then paraphrase the poem. So we start with the title and the author. So the title of this, Theories of Time and Space. So theories are ideas, time and space. Time, it could be like 9 o'clock in the morning, it could be through the day, it could be talking about our past and our future, it could be, stopping time. Okay, so you consider the title and think about all the things those words could mean, the different meanings. Space could be the space we inhabit here in the classroom, it could be outer space. I don't know, the word space is used a lot in business nowadays. When you're talking about marketing and, I've got a good product that's, this is a good space for my product. That's kind of a new idea, but I'm hearing that more in business. So, okay, theories of time and space. The poet here, do you know anything about the poet? No, I didn't either. I just found this poem at spring break last week. It was in a book I looked at, and I liked it. You want to consider the author, because if it's a Walt Whitman poem, you already know that Walt Whitman wrote around the Civil War time period. He was American. He was very pro-America, very patriotic, on the Union side, loved Abraham Lincoln. Okay. If it was a Robert Frost poem, he writes about small town America, early 20th century, writes a lot about working with your hands and, man, interacting with nature and living on a farm and small town life. So if you know something about the poet or the author, that can help inform you on this one. You don't know anything about this poet, I will tell you it's a Mississippi poet. She has served as Poet Laureate of the United States a couple times. But like you, I'd never heard of her before last week. So, before we dive right into the poem, just like with books, I want to survey the poem. And I'll do that with a pencil in my hand or a pen. And the first thing I'm looking at is how many stanzas and how many lines. So we've got 10 stanzas in this poem. There's only 2 lines for each stanza. Okay. So how many stanzas, how many lines? Is there a rhyming pattern? What's the punctuation do? And is there repetition? So for the rhyming pattern and the punctuation, I just look down the end of the lines, the last words. Though, home, somewhere, this, one, off, this, end, where, stitches over. It doesn't rhyme. There's not a rhyming pattern. I look at the punctuation. There are some periods. I notice they're not usually at the end of the lines or even the end of the stanzas. They're kind of mixed in. Okay. And I do see a couple dashes on the poem. A couple things about that, why we're looking for that stuff. I mentioned tone shifts happen. Not so much in this poem, but a lot of times there is a shift in tone or attitude. If I want to write a poem that's going to be real happy in the beginning and then get scary and bad at the end, one thing I could do is the first half of the poem could be a real uniform rhyming pattern, A, V pattern with, you know, a pattern to syllable counts, like the same syllable counts for each line, and it's all wonderful. And then halfway through where I want the attitude to change, I throw that out the window. And it stops rhyming, and it stops, you know, having a uniform syllable count, and now there's exclamation points and all kinds of stuff. I don't see that here. But if you identify that, a lot of times that will show you where that change happens, okay? The other comment about the punctuation, there are some dashes on here, and where the periods fall. They're not at the end of the lines, they're in the middle of the stanzas. Poetry is written, it's meant to be read aloud. And when you read a poem out loud, you follow the punctuation, not the lines. Okay? And as a poet, if I want the first half to be fast and then I want to slow you down, in your reading, I'll start using more commas and periods and dashes and things at the end to slow you down. Okay, so we want to be aware of that. So, survey the poem. Last thing we want to do is there repetition? This is before you even read it, but do you see entire lines that repeat? I don't. So consider a song a poem, like a lyrical poem. Songs have a chorus, that line or two or a few lines that repeat every so often through the song. We're looking for that, because we really want to hone in on that and focus on that if the poem has that. This poem doesn't have that. So that's it. Step 1, look at the title and the author. Step 2, survey the poem. Step 3, and I'm gonna let you do this right now real quick. Step 3 is simply read through it start to finish. Have a pen or pencil in your hand. If you see something, circle it, but we're not studying it yet. We're just reading straight through it, start to finish. Then I'm gonna ask you, what are the elements or ideas? Like surfacey, subject, what is it talking about? We'll go deep later, but the surface level. So read it now, and then I'll ask you. What are the ideas? Somebody just shout it out. What's one idea that you see?
Something about traveling a lot, like
Traveling?
different places.
Traveling? Maybe a road trip, because we're talking about highway signs. What else?
There's a lot of like destinations, like, oh yeah, this mountain or this rainforest.
Goes along with the idea of a road trip. There's geographic, like waypoints, like descriptions.
Like they went on like a trip and it changed them. Like,
People are
the
changed?
same
They're not,
as
okay.
Whenever they started.
Okay, so changes that happen.
You have deep imagery, like style, like personification too.
I like it. So as we go through slower and paraphrase and have a dialogue with the poem, we're looking for all these things, but you might spot it on your first reading. So the sky threatens rain. That's personification exactly. The sky is not threatening. Really, I mean, the weather is used symbolically also a lot of the time. So we want to pay attention to the weather. You know, the horror movie where the girl gets chopped up and stuff, like it starts in the night and it's nighttime and it's raining, right? So the weather, you know, symbolically is used a lot. So, okay, so we've got some ideas going. I saw Mississippi, I saw sand. Okay. Once you've read through it start to finish and you start getting some ideas that go along with subject, the surfacey, what's it about? Okay. Now we go through and paraphrase it. This is not translation. This is not me giving you a paragraph in Spanish and saying translate this to English and you go word for word and change it from Spanish to English. This is not even rewording it in your own words necessarily, but it's having a dialogue in your head about what this could mean. okay? And you wanna go slow, kind of a line or two at a time. These stanzas are only 2 lines, so I'll look at them that way. Right off the bat, I circled you. The first line, you can get there from here. The speaker is talking to us, the reader. It's a second person point of view. I know in the fall I told you we'll never have second person in here. For novels we won't, for major works we won't, but, okay, so early on in the beginning, we really want to pay attention to the beginning and the end of things, and early on, we usually can figure out the narrator pretty fast. And we'll talk about that with Gatsby in a little bit. But, so the first stanza, you can get there from here, though there's no going home. What does home mean?
Where you were before.
The place where you started, the place you were born,
Before, like where you were before.
where you were before, a previous place. Does it literally have to be your house where your mom and dad and puppy dog are? No. It could be anything that's what?
Comfortable to you?
Comfortable, familiar. If your family always goes to the same place in the summertime, that may feel like home to you. You feel safe. Okay. So if you get a word like home that has multiple meanings, you want to kind of think through what are the meanings. You can get there from here, though there's no going home, but you can't go back again. Everywhere you go will be somewhere you've never been. Initially, I have a problem with that because it's like, well, I go to Colorado a lot. I like it. I know where I'm going to eat. I know where I stay. In Ouray, Colorado, it's one of my favorite towns. My wife and I got married there. But the poem is saying, everywhere you go will be somewhere you've never been.
So I think it would be like different experiences.
Like you don't
Like
see the
one
same
time-
things each time, or maybe you do like there's like different experiences along the way.
Okay, so you have the experience of travel, and it's not always the same?
Yeah. So,
Right.
oh yeah, I go to this place all the time, but then
Right.
it would be different, like how you were talking about on spring, when you went to that place in spring break.
But the
20
music
years
was
ago, it
different.
was like this, but now. it's
Right,
like-
yeah, exactly, Bourbon Street, yeah. So the music is different than what I remembered and what it's known for. One year I go to Ouray and it's raining the whole time and snowing, and another year I go and it's sunny and pretty, and, right, so the experience is different. The places can change also, okay? Try this. Head south on Mississippi 49, so that's an interstate. Interstates, odd numbers go up and down. 49 goes up and down, I drove 49 the other day. One by one, mile markers ticking off another minute in your life. So the ideas of theme usually are bigger ideas than just a dog and an ice cream cone or a road trip. A road trip, by the way, is never just a road trip in literature, ever. There's always more to it. It's an epic journey. It's the changing of a character. It's the loss of innocence, whatever. So, where the periods fall in this poem are interesting to me, because you get to the end of the stanza, and it gives you an idea, and then you go to the next stanza, and maybe it's a different idea by the time you get to the period. So, one by one, mile markers ticking off, another minute of your life. Follow this to its natural conclusion, dead end. For just a split second, I'm thinking about death. Then you go to the next stanza, at the coast. Oh, okay, so it's not death, it's literally you drive south until you hit the Gulf of Mexico and you can't go anymore. So that's a dead end, at the coast. The pier at Gulfport, where riggings of shrimp boats are loose stitches. That could be imagery or maybe literally loose stitches. The ropes, the riggings holding the boats in, if they're threadbare and worn real bad, they might be like just barely hanging on. I don't know, it's imagery, maybe literal, maybe figurative. Loose stitches in a sky threatening rain, just personification, as Heather said. Cross over the man-made beach, 26 miles of sand dumped on a mangrove swamp, buried terrain of the past. I like this idea a lot. So you're gonna cross over the man-made beach, so it's not natural. We made it. We dumped a bunch of sand for 26 miles and made a beach. Okay. But in doing that, we buried a swamp. We bury the terrain of the past. The title of the poem talks about time and space. One of the things I said was, well, maybe it's talking about time, like the past or the future. Now we've got, maybe we're on to something. Buried terrain of the past. Bring only what you must carry. Tome of memory, book of memory. Tome is a book. I'm gonna stop there and say, this poet is a Mississippi poet. And when I read, bring only what you can carry, do you know what I'm thinking? What's the first thing that, a backpack, a go bag? When we left Seaside and last week during spring break and headed north, we saw blue signs everywhere on the highway posts that were hurricane evacuation signs, saying, in the case of a hurricane, this is a safe route, this will get you away from the water. So that's context. So setting is the story itself. Context is, what do we know about the author and when they wrote the story and when it was published and all of that. We talked about context, the Roaring Twenties, and F. Scott Fitzgerald, and the Lost Generation in France with Hemingway. We talked about that before spring break. That's all context. This is a Mississippi poet. She's talking about a road trip. Interestingly, she's not going away from the water, she's going to the water. But you have this idea of bring only what you must carry. Book of memory, it's random blank pages. What do you think about that? A journal, a book of memories. What are the blank pages?
Maybe that she wants to create new ones.
There's going to be new ones.
Like she's taking them with her to, like, we'll create new ones.
So the story's not over. So we're not at a dead end. There's more to come, right? And there's a space there for her to record that. On the dock, where you board the boat for Ship Island, someone will take your picture. The photograph, who you were, will be waiting when you return. The photograph, who you were, will be waiting for you when you return. Somebody in the last class tied that last stanza to the first stanza.
Like who you were before, like you went on that trip and like you come back with like memories and stuff like that.
You come back with memories
New experience.
and new experiences, and
You change as a person.
you've changed as a person.
You see it differently from how you started to now. And
You're-
it's more like, it's showing that they started like this and this is how they ended. It's like about the journey, like, as you're going.
So what you're telling me is, we're made up of our experiences, and as we collect those and live life, we change, and we're not the same people we used to be.
Yeah.
Is that what you're telling me? Could that be a theme?
Mm-hmm.
Does that fit? That first stanza, you can't go home again. That's gonna play a part in The Great Gatsby. We're gonna talk about that idea with the novel that we're about to read. But, yeah, you can go back to your childhood home. The home has changed. Maybe when you lived there, the shutters were blue and now they're black, or maybe your family took good care of the house and now it's kind of run down and not taken care of. Places change, but more importantly, you change, and you don't see it the same way. And it's kind of interesting, several years ago, as an adult, I did go back to my childhood home, the house I lived in when I was in elementary school, and the field by my elementary school that was a couple blocks from the house, the old neighborhood. It was a lot smaller than I remember. I mean, when I was a kid, it was like a huge world and all I knew. And, you know, walking 2 blocks to school as I did in 3rd grade felt like I was going on an adventure, you know, and now I'm completely different. It's not the same place. So lastly, when you have a working theory, go back to the title, does it work? Theories of time and space. We move through life, we move through space, time and space. Over time, we do change, we do evolve. Your theme that you guys are giving me, the title does fit that. A last step, if you're writing a paper that's real important to get it right, you can do like you do in math, where you check your work. Keep that theme in mind of, you can't go home again because you've changed as a person based on your experiences. That's what y'all were telling me. Now go back through the poem. We're not gonna do this, but you could go back through the poem stanza by stanza. Doesn't work, doesn't work, doesn't work, right? And that's a good idea to do, because you might come up with a theme that's different than somebody else in the class. You could both be right, as long as you can say, I'm getting this from stanza 3 and 4 and 7, and if it fits, if it works throughout the poem, then you're right. That's why I like English so much. There's not one right answer. It's gotta be, as long as you have textual evidence and can point back at the poem. Okay. So what we've done is, we looked at the title and considered the author. We surveyed the poem. What's it look like? Stanzas, punctuation, rhyming, is there repetition? We read through it start to finish once, and then you guys started telling me what ideas you saw. Road trip, Mississippi, sand. Okay, a couple of you started getting deeper than that right off the bat, which is great. So those ideas go to subject. Then we went slowly through it, each line, kind of talking about what it could mean, looking for these things, these rhetorical devices, and just trying to find some connections and patterns, and, you know, going slowly. Poetry is not hard. Sometimes it takes a little time. Sometimes you gotta go through it a few times. Okay. But that's a good strategy for doing it. And by the time you get to the end, going slowly, you've got a working theory, or a theme, I should say, as y'all did. Go back to the title, and then if you need to, run through the poem one more time, real quick, with that theme in your mind. Does it fit? Does it work? Okay. And that's it. That's the magic. That's the mystery. Like, okay. So that's the strategy that I like to use for how you approach a poem. A lot of it works the same way with novels. Okay. I'm gonna give you time to annotate that. It is a daily grade. Make sure your name's on the top of it. What does it mean to annotate? If you had Miss Cox last year, she taught you to use different colors and do all these really specific, really good things. She's very good at that. For me, what it means is read it with a pen or pencil in your hand. As you're having the dialogue in your head, as you're seeing these things, as you're seeing that personification, underline it. As you're seeing words like home that have multiple meanings, just jot them down to the side. Your main ideas, as you're working through your ideas, just jot them down on the side. You can circle, underline, highlight, draw little hearts, stars, I don't care. But show me that you can interact with the poem as you go through. It's not just about underlining some stuff. Okay. And we'll move on with The Great Gatsby here in about 10 minutes.